This is a DMB Society.
I got a sister named Jane.
And this is the pod that Jane likes.
Hi, hello, and welcome into episode 121 of the pod that Jane likes, where we are a weekly roundtable discussion of all things happening in the world of the Dave Matthews Band. And as we continue to inch closer and closer to the start of summer tour, today we are diving into another album revisit, and this one marks number 6 on our ongoing revisit series. We started this journey way back in episode 19 with DMB's independent release, Remember Two Things, then moved to Under the Table and Dreaming in episode 29. We covered Crash in episode 57 and the masterpiece that is Before These Crowded Streets in episode 95. And most recently, we chatted about Everyday in episode 116. So if you've been along for the ride, you know the deal here. We like to take a step back. We look at these albums in context. We talk about what was going on at the time, how they were made, how they've held up. We try to cover all of it. But before we dive in, if you've been enjoying the pod that Jane likes, we would be oh so appreciative if you took a couple of seconds to rate, review, subscribe, wherever it is that you're listening, or if you're watching over on YouTube. It really does go a long way in helping more people find out about the podcast. And lastly, if you want more DMB in your life, and I guess let's be honest, if you're here, you probably do, come hang out with us on socials. We're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, we're on Facebook, we're on all of the usual spots. Okay, so let's bring in the rest of the gang. Jeanette, Trisha, Matt, how are we doing? How are we feeling about this busted stuff? Are we excited to jump back into the year 2002?
I'm so excited I can barely contain myself. This is my favorite album by far, and I am just giddy to talk about it. I'm so excited.
You never know how this recording is going to go. I think it could be really fun and exciting, and there's a lot to talk about, and I'm looking forward to all of it.
Yeah, and like researching and listening back, I kind of fell back in love with this album, and I'm excited to jump back in the time capsule the time machine, actually, back to 2002.
Okay, so let's hop back into that pod that Jane likes time machine, and let's set the dial to 2002. 2002, kind of a strange in-between year where the world was kind of finding its footing after the events that took place on September 11th. And everything just kind of felt a little bit different, a little more serious, if you will, more aware. And you saw this everywhere. You saw it in airports. You saw it on the news. It was just kind of the general mood of everything. Yet at the same time, there was this feeling that people were starting to look for some sense of normal again. They were looking for something fun, and maybe equally as important, they were looking for something familiar. In the US, George W. Bush was in his first full year as president, and his war on terror was underway. And there was this mix of patriotism, but also uncertainty that was very present in the air. However, culture didn't stop because, well, it never does. At the movies, it was, in fact, a huge year. Spider-Man was everywhere. The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, kept that epic fantasy wave going. And Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets proved that Harry Potter wasn't just a moment, but rather, to some degree, it was very much taking over. People were going back to the theaters, and they were going back to the theaters in a big way, probably for the spectacle of it all, but also to get out and to feel something normal again. On TV, things also took quite a bit of a shift. American Idol debuted in 2002, and all of a sudden, it felt like anyone could sort of become a star overnight. That whole era of reality TV, this is kind of where it feels like it starts to lock in. Music-wise, things were sort of all over the place, and I mean that in a good way. You still had pop kind of dominating, but you could kind of tell that was starting to change. Justin Timberlake went solo, and over the course of the year, it sort of felt like Ashanti and Nelly were everywhere.
Yeah.
And then you start to feel that late 1990s pop wave starting to loosen its grip a little bit. It kind of felt like things were starting to open up musically, if that makes any sense. Technology-wise, things were changing everywhere. The Apple iPod was very much starting to catch on. Napster had totally turned the music industry upside down. And the way people were starting to listen to music was very much shifting in a really dramatic way, even if everybody didn't realize it quite yet. In terms of sports, there were certainly some really big moments. The New England Patriots won the Super Bowl. And not only did they win the Super Bowl, but very much kicked off what turned out to be a dynasty in New England. The Los Angeles Lakers repeated as champs on the hardwood, and the Anaheim Angels won a World Series that just about nobody saw coming. So that's the backdrop, a world that was still processing, but starting to move forward, trying to find its rhythm. And in the middle of all of that, the Dave Matthews Band drops Busted Stuff. Okay, so let's bring everybody back in. Jeanette, Trisha, Matt, when you guys think of 2002, before we actually get into this album, as we're kind of recapping the year as a whole, what stands out? What are you doing at that point in time? What are you listening to? What are you watching? What stood out to you? What was the vibe that everybody thinks of when they look back to 2002?
Well, 2002, Jeanette, was a completely different 2002. I think this was a time for me where I was searching for an identity. I was super into house music and trance and tribal. And so I kind of, I was having my moment with that. And that's what I was listening to. And it's not that I, wasn't listening to Dave Matthews Band, but it was definitely my year of the least amount of shows I went to. So I had a little moment with all different other kinds of music, but you bet your ass I was at the store buying Busted Stuff the day it came out.
What about 2002, Matt?
Oh man, so 2002 Matt is at Boston University. He's wearing jeans with flip-flops. He's got like puka shell necklaces, and he is like falling hard for Dave Matthews Band at this point. I mean, he'd already fallen pretty hard, but like he's falling really hard. And the April shows in Boston, the Epic Bartender / You Never Know debut show, which is 4702, which is regarded as one of the best DMB shows of all time. I was there for that, and that was amazing. My first like real 2-night run in Boston. I had made plans to travel to a couple of shows over the summer, which was big for me. It was like one of the first times I had done that. And so this was like, this was the height, and we're getting so much, there was so much buzz on the internet, which like the internet that it was then is a little bit different than what it was now. And, rumors are flying about these scrapped Lily White sessions, and, we're coming off of Every Day. And it was a cool time to be a fan, jumping around on Nancy's.org and like just reading all of this stuff and not knowing what was true and what wasn't, and like who these people were and all of that stuff. So it was a fun time to be a fan. And this was also a time where these songs that we were about to get with Busted Stuff had lived on the road for a while. And that was huge because, I remember downloading, the first time that Bartender was played live. I remember downloading like the first time Grace Is Gone was played, and, listening to those versions and eagerly anticipating them getting a studio release so that you didn't have to, wait 4 hours for one file to download so you could listen to the newest DMB song. So it was definitely a very interesting time to be a fan.
Yeah, I'm having a little bit of a moment here as you were describing what was happening in 2002, Sean. Like, I don't remember anything from 2002. I think I remember being in a space of like, yeah, I was processing a lot. The world was like at war. We had like, it just, everything in 2002 feels icky. I wasn't into any of the movies you mentioned. Like, I just wasn't
Right.
involved culturally. I was
Mhm.
in college going to Penn State, probably just taking, every day by day, and nothing exciting was happening in my life. And I am wondering now, live on this episode, if that's why when Busted Stuff came out, it hit it, it gave me life. Truly,
Mhm.
like it
Right.
gave me that breath of air that I needed. And so I'm like thinking that's exactly why this album means so much and why it has hit me so hard. So thanks for that sort of somber memory of I don't remember much at all from 2002.
Yeah, when I think back, and I touched upon this in recapping the year, but the year after 9/11 very much just felt like this collective desire from everybody, is what it felt like, at least at the time, to get back to normalcy. It was like everything got upended on the back half of 2001, and it felt like, and maybe it was my age at the time, but it felt like this was the first point where everything was happening really fast, right? Like news was 24 hours a day now, and everything was in your face at all time, and you could have any piece of music that you wanted carried around in your pocket on your iPad. You could download it on any of the file sharing websites online. Everything started to feel really fast in 2002, and I just remember it having this sense of kind of collectively everybody trying to get back to some sense of normalcy. And interestingly enough, in the world of DMB, that was also kind of the case, right? Because Every Day came out, and we talked about this in our last episode. That was such a sharp turn from what the band had been doing prior to the dropping of that album. So in some ways, that's kind of exactly what the theme of this album is. Maybe let's kind of jump right into that, kind of jump right into where the story of Busted Stuff begins. Interestingly enough, it's not so much in 2002, but a little bit before that. We're going to kind of set the table for this record, and then, as we always do, go track by track and break it down. But this album, maybe as much as any in the catalog of this band, it matters quite a bit. All of the things that led up to the release of this album, a lot of the things that took place carry more weight than maybe they do with some of the other releases. So we're going to turn the clock back just a little bit, and then we'll get back up to speed, back up to 2002. After Before These Crowded Streets, the band went back into the studio with Steve Lillywhite, the same producer who helped define their Hall of Fame sound over the course of their previous few records. Before These Crowded Streets was, of course, DMB's darkest, most introspective album to date. And what happened in the studio with Steve for this next record felt like an additional step in that direction, even a little bit darker, a little bit more experimental. And these sessions, which are now called the Lillywhite sessions, weren't necessarily built in any type of rush. They were slow, they were collaborative. They were almost DMB just kind of feeling out what that next step was. And somewhere along the way, all of it fell apart. The band wasn't happy, the label wasn't confident, and instead of finishing what they were working on, they walked away and they pivoted hard. Enter the Everyday album. With Everyday, they teamed up with Glenn Ballard, as we talked about in our Everyday revisit, and they recorded Everyday in a matter of days. It was very polished, it was very radio friendly, and it was an album that kind of felt like a departure from what they had been working on. But then the big twist in all of this is something that nobody could have seen coming, and that is that the Lillywhite sessions leaked. We talked a little bit earlier about how music was being rapidly shared online, and that's what happened here. These studio sessions that they had been recording with Steve Lillywhite, they leaked online, and not only did they leak, they spread, and they spread fast. So picture peak Napster era. I'm talking burned CDs, file sharing, message boards that Matt touched on. And suddenly fans are hearing this lost Dave Matthews Band album, this album that really wasn't supposed to exist. And what did they think of the album? They loved it. It felt like a return to the band's roots. It had much more emotion than Every Day. It was more raw. It was more real. And DMB found themselves in this very weird position because they had already released Every Day, but the thing that they didn't release is the one thing that everybody in the fan base seemingly couldn't stop talking about. So now we get back to 2002, and they make the decision to go back. They make the decision to revisit these songs, this time not with Steve Lillywhite, but with a new producer, Steve Harris. And they decide to tighten up these songs. They decide to rewrite parts of them, to reshape them, and to finally give them the official release that seemingly everybody in the fan base was clamoring for. And the release becomes what we now know as Busted Stuff. So here's one more thing, though. Here's something that I think makes this album so interesting. Depending upon who you ask, Busted Stuff is either this beautifully finished versions of these Lillywhite session songs, or it's a version that lost a little bit of magic in the process. I think it's the tension between raw and refined. And I think that raw and refined theme is kind of the whole story of this album. And I'm excited to jump into going track by track with you all and kind of breaking it down. And where this album kicks off is with the title track. The first track on Busted Stuff is in fact Busted Stuff, coming in as a quick hitter at 3 minutes and 48 seconds. We have the title track. Trisha, do you want to kick off our song by song discussion and share some of your thoughts about the song Busted Stuff?
Busted Stuff is not enough, never too much. You know, that song? The way it opens, the kind of musically how it opens. I think that this song is so romantic. It's almost like a perspective, like a man's perspective of what a woman can do to them on the inside that they never talk about. Like the way she moves so cool. Got me feeling just like a fool. No man has ever said that to me. And so, right. And then
There hasn't.
right. Or like, being able to just know, like, I know that she's going to leave my broken heart behind. Like this is, I just always appreciate that when Dave puts me in the perspective of a male's brain, because it's so hard to go there. And so I think Busted Stuff is just like a totally, in some ways, sad song, but totally romantic from a woman's. I guess it depends on if you're a man or a woman listening to this song. But to me, it sounds very romantic. That's my take on Busted Stuff.
I think with this track, it's naturally, because it's the first track on the album, it's the very first comparison that we could make from what we got in Busted Stuff with what had leaked in the Lillywhite sessions. I think you find on the Busted Stuff version, it's a little bit cleaner, it's a little bit more defined, versus the more laid back, almost demo-like feel of really all of the Lillywhite sessions, but also Busted Stuff specifically. Matt, so my question is, how does this set the tone for you with this record? And how do you feel this first opening track fits into this whole raw versus super polished debate that naturally comes with these two albums?
Yeah, well, I before I say anything, I just wanted to mention that if you are listening to this and you love all of this talk about Busted Stuff, there is a podcast, Records and Riffs, with Matt Norlander, where he has sat down with Steve Lillywhite, and he actually sits down with Steve Harris to talk a lot about the recording of Busted Stuff. Steve Harris, of course, produced Busted Stuff, and also was an assistant producer, I believe, on some of the other band's music. So he has a very unique perspective on what was going on in the band at this time and how these recordings came about. And so if you listen to that, you'll hear some of the things that I'm going to say are directly from that podcast, because I am enamored with just the whole concept of how deep and nerdy some of those conversations get on that podcast. But go check that out if you want to. I was going to say, I think the biggest thing with Busted Stuff in terms of musically for me is it starts out so almost like a solo performance. You don't get into the other instruments besides Dave come in later, and you don't hear from Roy until the solo at the end. And it's kind of a unique way to start, especially for a song like this, where I believe the Busted Stuff Lily White version is not like that. As we talked about, it's sort of a demo, so everyone's sort of like noodling around throughout the whole thing. And so yeah, I think it's an excellent start. I think it's an awesome album title, as well, as we're talking about this. The song Busted Stuff, the album Busted Stuff. It's just, I think it works. I think it works tremendously well for a kickoff here.
Yeah, the title in some ways is just the most fitting for the subject matter that we were dealing with, where they're kind of revisiting this leaked demo, and I think that this song, especially coming off of Everyday, the first couple moments of this track, it kind of provides that signature DMB groove that so many people were thinking that we were going to get with Everyday. Of course, they went in a different direction, but we do get that here. And I think you're right, Matt. This isn't an opening track that kind of hits you in the head. It's more of a mood setter. Jeanette, how do you think that this plays as a mood setter for this record?
I think that's a really good way to put it, a mood setter. Like, I don't know if I would have picked this song to lead off the album, but when you do listen to the album as a whole, it is a really good opener. And I kind of love that that everybody in the band slowly comes in. I like that it's only the 5 of them. The 5 original members are on this album, and this is the only album that it's only the 5 original members. There's no guests. And so I kind of love how it just starts with Dave, and then, everybody gradually comes in. And Roy is so prominent on this album that I understand that he doesn't come into like 3 minutes, but his solo in the outro, leaving the song, and like everything, almost the song fades out, but it feels like all the other instruments and everything else fades out, but Roy is still playing. Like, if you listen with headphones on, there's something about, it's like almost like Roy's just still there for a while until he finally fades out. So I really think it's a great like opener, in the sense that like you're gonna hear a lot more of Roy on the rest of this album, and he's just magnificent on it. So again, it took me like to really sit down with this album again with headphones on and hear that. So, yeah, I think it's a good opener. It changed my mind listening this time around.
It's so interesting, I think, just for our listeners to understand. I listened to Busted Stuff without knowing anything about the Lily White sessions, really. I mean, I knew about it, but I didn't really listen at that time. I didn't care about that. I didn't know or care at that time. But everybody else here has. And so in some ways, you went into Busted Stuff. You went into